Goodbye Iowa picks up right on the heels of the Iron team. Buffy is explaining Maggie's plan from the previous episode to the Scoobies. Spike is still present and, as ever, anxious to comment on Buffy and her taste in men.
I got a cousin married to a regurgitating Frovolox demon that's got better instincts than you.
Whatever your feelings about Riley and Parker, I think it's important to keep in mind that Spike's commentary on Buffy's personal life sometimes feels like it has a whiff of truth to it. But that's because Spike is a manipulator and knows the best places to stab at Buffy are at the things she already fears about herself. Spike speaks enough truth to seduce Buffy into a bit of the old self-hatred, but I think it's important in our reading of the show to distinguish between truth and his manipulations. Riley bursts in and insists there must be a miscommunication between Walsh and Buffy. As Buffy starts to explain, Riley spies hostile 17 in the corner, which begins to undermine his willingness to trust her. Feeling torn, he wanders off. Adam happens upon a child and asks him what he is. The child describes Adam as a monster with a mini-disc floppy chest drive. Be wary when including tech in your episode, or it will come to feel more dated and silly than the first iMac.
Is iMac?
Mommy.
The gang ends up in Xander's basement, Giles on blow-up furniture under Xander's disco ball. They speculate as to Riley's intentions, and Anya makes a telling statement.
After everything you've been through with Angel, you really should get yourself a boring boyfriend, like Xander.
That was the idea. Riley was supposed to be Mr. Joe Guy.
I've read that picking your next relationship as a pendulum swing away from your last works out for the best. On TV, the gang hears of the little boy's murder, and Buffy Braveheart speeches everyone into action.
That probably would have sounded more commanding if I wasn't wearing my yummy sushi pajamas.
Riley relates Buffy's story to Forrest, and Forrest lashes out.
I wouldn't put it past Buffy to get on Professor Walsh's bad side. She tends to put her nose where it doesn't belong.
Like, where? Against Riley's neck? The Initiative discovers Professor Walsh is dead with a wound that looks reminiscent of a stake. Riley calls Forrest on his BS, reminding everyone about the Polgara demon from the previous episode. Riley tells Buffy that Maggie is dead. They speak awkwardly, with Riley not knowing who to trust. Willow stops by to visit Tara.
I had so much fun the other night. Those spells.
Yeah, that was nice.
I hope you don't think that I just come over for the spells and everything. I mean, I really like just talking and hanging out with you and stuff.
Willow wants to do a spell with Tara to locate demonic energy in the area. Where a moment ago Tara seemed very excited about spells and stuff, there is suddenly some trepidation. They attempt the spell and Tara sabotages it, clearly hiding something. Buffy tries Willy's to find the Polgara, and Riley tails her in and starts accusing Buffy of demon collusion. Obviously he's feeling torn, but it's very hard to empathize with his predicament because we haven't gotten to know Riley well enough to recognize and understand any deep desire for belonging. Not anywhere near the way we did Faith, whose eventual trip to the mayor's office was well set up. As much as we didn't want her to succumb, we knew her well enough to understand why she did the things she did. And the Initiative has been painted as so manifestly bro-evil that Riley just looks like a sweaty dimwit to me in this scene. This could have worked if we'd also been seduced by the Iowa we were saying goodbye to. Simplicity, innocence, binary morality. Instead, all those things mostly just need to be inferred. There is nothing wrong with Marc Blucas' performance here. I actually think he does a pretty good job. Also, there's a strangely disturbing undertone to this scene. Riley is dealing with the purging of his illusions, which is also manifesting in metaphor through his withdrawal from the drugs that he's been fed by Walsh. But Walsh was also using psychological techniques to control Riley's allegiances.
Riley, make me proud.
Something she saw slipping away in the previous episode. In this scene, his willingness to substitute one powerful female role model for another has creepy connotations. Don't worry, I won't torture you with his sex face again. Riley is getting the shakes from not taking his one-a-day, introduced in the previous episode. After Buffy and Xander set out to break into the Initiative, Riley wakes up and tries to go after her. Willow steps in the way and...
Buffy killed me!
Hey! Ooh, I forgot about Riley tossing Willow to the ground. You do not do that to Willow. Dark Willow, okay, maybe, but I formally retract all of my Riley doesn't actively suck, only passively defenses.
These guys don't know they've been getting meds through their food.
Wait, I thought it was the vitamins from the previous episode. Wasn't Riley eating in the same cafeteria as Buffy all the time? Seems like a bit of a continuity error. Anyway, Riley follows Buffy in, and Adam reveals himself looking quite a bit like one of my old He-Man toys.
He-Man.
Beastman's no match for Battle Armor He-Man.
Beastman, Battle Armor He-Man, and Skeletor each sold separately.
They fight, Riley gets injured and taken off by Forrest. Buffy pines over the plight of a character we can't really love except for his performance. Episode over. Well, that was a hurricane of plot. Season 4 of Buffy ran into two unforeseen issues that the writers have all said at different points severely derailed the season's arc. And I'm going to assume there was a third influence. The first was Seth Green asking to be let out of his contract so he could go film a movie. Originally, there were long-term plans for Oz's character. The second was that Lindsay Krause, who played Professor Walsh, also requested to be let out of her contract. The rumors I've read say that she was intended to be the big bad for the entirety of Season 4. And the thing I'm assuming was also an influence was Angel Season 1, which included the unceremonious departure of Glenn Quinn. There's a chance as dual showrunner, Joss was spread too thin. The structure for interesting ideas were in place in Season 4. Group identity versus the individual, science versus magic, and maybe with a sprinkle of the ugly aspects of behavioral psychology. But a few episodes in, the arc began to meander. Buffy seasons all feature a similar structure where there is one big bad and then at least two little bads, one of the three being a mid-season reveal. The Masters' little bads were Darla and then the Anointed One. Angelus had Spike and Drusilla, and the Mayor had Mr. Trick and then Faith. But Krause was an Academy Award-nominated actress at the time and was also in Michael Mann's The Insider that same year. Something happened, though no one has ever stated outright what it was, and her desire to leave caused a radical change in the trajectory of the season arc, from Professor Walsh to Franken Adam. These things happen, but one of the consequences is when in previous seasons we got to know and sometimes gleefully fall in love with captivating emotional big bads, we don't have any connection to Adam, so what he lacks in thematic emotional connection is made up for by raw threat and firepower. He is individually unstoppable. But Professor Walsh's character had been built up to represent the anti-individual, or, in keeping with the parlance we've developed so far, the anti-existentialist. If genuine meaning is the spark created by personal choice and ensuing action, there really is no normal. There is just the individual. But through Walsh, we see many of the forms in which identity is forced upon us in mass. The way in which we are normalized. She is a military leader who homogenizes her soldiers with discipline and control. She is a professor who normalizes thought through curriculum and grades. She is the scientist who controls behavior through operant conditioning. And she is the parent who controls behavior through manipulation and expectation. Consider Giles and Maggie's conversation again from A New Man.
I think it's best if we let a young person find their own strengths.
I think it can be unhealthy to take on adult roles too early. What I suspect I'm seeing is a reaction to the absence of a male role model.
Unlike Adam, Maggie was at least thematically interesting. In contrast, Adam has a disk drive in his chest. When Adam asks the little boy, "What am I?" I read that as the writers trying to understand him as well. But it isn't just Krause's departure that's the problem. Nothing until this two-parter really provided any sense of the dire for the Scoobies. Clearly the Initiative were meant to be something to this season's arc, but for 11 episodes they do almost nothing, save for chipping Spike. And because of that, until we get to this Cyclone two-parter, it was never really clear whether or not they were even the season's antagonist. As much as the one-off episodes this season have been spectacular and hilarious, the arc has been flatlined and done nothing since the first couple episodes, when the idea for the Initiative got bogged down in Riley and Buffy's relationship, something I think the writers just understood better. The two-part episode plays like the writers suddenly realized the season was more than halfway over and sent it into overdrive. To make matters worse, the arc is put into motion through Riley's character and not Buffy's. In Season 1, Buffy had to accept her destiny to save the world. In Season 2, Buffy had to make a choice. And in Season 3, Buffy had to face off against her darker half. Now, by virtue of Riley being the one torn between worlds, or torn between Buffy and Adam, Buffy is no longer central to the arc, which makes it, for me, profoundly less compelling. The episode's title, Goodbye Iowa, refers to Riley in two ways. For those who don't know, Iowa is stereotypically considered a sleepy state in this country. farmers and corn and small towns and quiet life. And so the title could be Goodbye Normal, a concept that was given to Riley by Walsh. The simplest parallel I could think of for what Riley is going through in this episode is the fall of the devoutly religious, whose personal and social norms were established for them by someone else. Were the initiative a cult and Professor Walsh the cult leader, then this is the face of Riley learning that it isn't a sin to masturbate the way he thought it was. So much wasted time. But framing Riley as normal now backfires a bit because the writers have confused normal with boring. I'm by no means anti-Riley. At least he never murdered one of Buffy's teachers or left creepy stalkerific pictures in her bedroom. But complete lack of any spice is not a flavor. The way Riley is written, there has been nothing for us to identify with or attach to. Riley was brought in to be a symbol, and his defining feature is being interested in Buffy. Because of that, Riley's predicament is difficult to empathize with because we don't care about him. There are a lot of great, normal, everyman characters. It doesn't require being devoid of personality, and the focus on Riley for the rest of the season is a huge stumbling block for me. This season has been about stripping away from Buffy the comfortable habit and familiarity of high school. She responded initially by gravitating towards a structure that was familiar to her, which led her into the Parker situation and that ensuing fallout. Then, as the Scoobies were falling apart, she leapt into Riley's life and tried to fit herself in there. But to me, Buffy's division of identity effectively ended when she told Walsh that Walsh didn't know what a Slayer was, and then had her yummy sushi pajama monologue. Still, there are many interesting threads here to be resolved, and bridges to be mended with the other Scoobies. As much as I find the arc in this season tedious, I find everyone's individual journeys incredibly relatable, as they all try and navigate this season of personal upheaval. Mostly people tend to think of their identity as a static thing, the sum of a great story we keep in our heads with many chapters of memories that tell us in no uncertain terms who we are, incorporating all the details of our setting. I am a teacher, I am a student, I am a soldier, and I am in love. But the unexamined conclusions we drew about ourselves from those previous chapters are often flawed at best, and we are not static, but beings trapped in the flow of time, always moving forward. The voyage has a way of stripping from us things we took for granted, losing a job you've had for years, the loss of a defining love, discovering that the truths you were taught were of someone else's construction, the end of a chapter and no idea how to start the next. And in the ebb and flow of each passing year, during those evenings when we stand at the top of the hill, deciding whether or not to head back down and get our rock, we're often forced to ask ourselves a question we might have thought resolved decades ago. Who am I?
What am I?
You're a monster.
I thought so.